In sub-freezing rural Michigan temperatures, more than 40 Jack Russells were left out in the cold at a breeding facility. One died. A PETA investigator documented the cruelty, and when the authorities wouldn't act, PETA protesters came in to force them to act. The anatomy of a PETA protest, how victory was won. Next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this inside look at animal rights, brought to you by PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. On today's episode, how a small band of dedicated PETA protesters saved more than 40 Jack Russells left out in the freezing cold at a Michigan breeding facility. It all began when a PETA undercover investigator took a job at John Jones's breeding facility in Missaukee, Michigan. To approximate the map, if Michigan is your right paw, the dogs were at approximately the right ring finger, left outside in freezing temperatures. But once the investigator got the documentation he needed, which you can see at PETA.org, the county sheriffs wouldn't act. No one acted to save the dogs. That's when PETA swung into action with Jonathan Horn going to Michigan and Tricia Lebkuecher running a remote control center from her office in Tennessee. They had no idea if they'd be successful. Here's the inside story of the protest to save more than 40 freezing Jack Russell Terriers on the PETA Podcast. So here we are. We're talking with Jonathan Horn, who was on site in Missaukee County, Michigan, where the dogs were, and then Tricia Lebkuecher, who was organizing the protest, and they join us both now on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to both of you.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
What a tremendous victory for PETA that you could get people there in Missaukee County and stage this protest for 4 days and get the authorities to act. Jonathan, you were there on the scene. First of all, it must be gratifying to see the results of all the hard work that you put in.
It is. It's the best feeling in the world. It's why we do what we do, is for these victories. And it's amazing how quickly it happened. You know, sometimes with campaigns, they go on for weeks, months, or even years before we win. PETA has a tendency to win things eventually, even if it takes a while. But this one happened in 4 days, which is really quite remarkable.
Yeah. And Tricia, you were organizing the protest to get people from all over the country to converge on Missaukee County. That must not have been easy.
Yeah, it was quite an effort. It was all hands on deck, I like to say. We just decided to protest on Friday, New Year's Eve, because of the conditions. Were getting colder. The sheriff had refused to act. And so over this holiday weekend, we decided to mobilize everybody that we could and bring them onto, into Missaukee County. There's not a lot of people in Missaukee County. I had heard 771 get thrown out there as a number of people who were in the immediate surrounding area. So, and that's not PETA supporters, that's just people in general. So we had to go far and wide. We have a great colleague in Detroit, Maria, who was able to come up and bring some folks, and Jonathan was able to come up from Chicago and bring some folks. We had another great activist and colleague, Lauren, who flew in from Boston. And between the three of them, they really were the ones who kept at it. Maria and Lauren actually slept overnight in the sheriff's office the first night. As people started seeing their actions and seeing our protests, it started with 8 people originally, and it just kept growing and growing and growing as the investigation got out and the story about these dogs got widespread attention. We really were able to mobilize hundreds of people calling in and 24 almost coming from all over the country to stand up for these dogs. We would have had 45 by the end of the week if we hadn't won, I bet.
Well, it was 4 days of protest, and a protest like this really is, I don't want to say it's unprecedented, but you just don't see many protests like this happen where they come up spontaneously. Like you said, it got down to like -5 degrees down there. Something had to be done with the dogs. Tell me what the investigator found, because the pictures of the investigation, once people see it, they kind of get the urgency of this. Tell me about the breeder, John Jones, and the 50 dogs there.
The investigator found that John Jones was twisting and ripping the tails off of these dogs, which, by the way, is a felony in the state of Michigan. It's felony cruelty to animals. He would also clip the dew claw off of the dogs, which is much like our thumbs. It has a bone in it and nerves, and extremely painful. So imagine someone just hacking off your thumb with wire cutters or hedge trimmers. Absolutely horrendous what he did to those dogs. And then on top of that, he left them outside without any kind of stimulation, without any kind of socialization, in these small cages where they were left out in all elements, all weather extremes. And these are short-haired Jack Russell Terriers, so they're not meant to be out in extreme cold.
I had a Jack Russell at one point. They're short hair. They're not, you want to put a coat on if the temperature dips into the 30s even. But how cold did it get there at Missaukee County?
It was -6 the night before. That was the air temperature, not the feel-like temperature, the night before the dogs were rescued. The feel-like was about -10 with the wind chill. And the following night, at the night after they were rescued, it was an air temperature of -10. So already one dog had died on his property, and there probably would have been more if authorities didn't act when they did.
Now, people don't really, they have to really understand what's going on here. Here's a guy who is breeding Jack Russells. He doesn't bring them inside. There's no inside. There's no there. It's just like, describe it as like a kind of tarp or tent, or how would you describe where they were intended to live?
It was like a wired cage, and then there was a little kind of crate in there where they kind of like a doghouse, and some old straw. It didn't look like it was replaced regularly. It was clearly wet. The dogs were muddy and wet. So not only are they out in these frigid temperatures, but they're soaked to the bone, making it that much worse. They were not allowed out of their cage at all. They weren't even able to interact with each other, and had no human interaction other than when he came to change the water or food. So these dogs were showing stereotypic behavior, which is a sign of extreme mental duress. They were running around in circles, jumping up and down, clearly just trying to keep themselves occupied because they were bored and not receiving the stimulation that they need.
Well, Jonathan, does John Jones, who's the breeder, I mean, in the course of his duties, I guess, he doesn't care about it. He just lets them be. He
didn't even know one of his dogs died until the PETA investigator told him. He wasn't even aware that this dog had died. In addition to that, the investigator found that their water was frozen. They had to use their muzzle to try to break open the ice to get water out. Anyone who cares about their dog and is checking on them would see if the water was getting frozen. I mean, they wouldn't even be in that situation in the first place, period. Yeah. But he wasn't even doing basic things like changing out dry straw. He wasn't putting jackets on them. He wasn't bringing them inside when it was cold. He wasn't changing their water regularly enough that it was starting to freeze solid. So no, it was extreme abuse, extreme neglect. And this isn't the first time that he's been caught doing this either. He had dogs removed in 2008, about 65 dogs, and then another 165 in 2013. So this is nothing new. We're seeing the same thing over and over and over again with this guy.
50 dogs, is that his full complement at this time, or is it just a portion of the dogs in his facility?
I believe it was 41 was the exact number. Mm-hmm. So 42 if you include the dog that passed just before.
And is that it? I mean, that's what his capacity was at this time.
Yes, but in the past, he's had as many as 165 seized from him. So anywhere between, he may have even had more than that, but somewhere between 41 and 165, maybe even 200 dogs on his property.
And the investigator going in, he was an employee, right? Or how did he get inside?
My understanding is he was hired to help. Jones was looking for help with the dogs, and so he hired someone. And fortunately, it was someone from PETA who could expose this rampant animal abuse and put an end to it.
Yeah, Tricia, when you saw pictures of the investigation, what was your reaction?
Honestly, when I saw the video, I was absolutely mortified. I thought, we have to get this out. People will be flocking to protest this if people can see what is happening. We weren't able to release the footage or the photos from the investigation until the release went out for our protest. So the first few people who came to the demonstration didn't know anything visually. They had only heard orally, their dogs, they're being kept in these horrendous conditions. And so as soon as we released the investigation footage and images, the calls just came flooding in. Dozens of people were reaching out to us. I joke that my entire team turned into travel agents because we just had so many people who were asking me, calling Jonathan and Lauren and everyone else on our team, asking how they could get involved, how they could help save these dogs. And from our great activists doing the sit-in, we know that thousands and thousands of calls were just coming in. The lines were ringing off the hook at the sheriff's office, begging them to do something for these dogs.
And usually this is what it takes, people calling in and then the officials, the authorities reacting to that. Jonathan, you were there, on the ground. What was it like to be in the sit-in there in Missaukee County?
The feeling amongst the activists was a sense of urgency. We have to rescue these dogs and we have to get it done today. And I will say the morale of the activists, because they were so focused on helping these dogs, and we just have this incredibly beautiful, supportive group here at PETA and network of activists, that even though it was a very stressful situation and we were met with a lot of adversity from the sheriff's office, the morale never faltered. Two activists slept there through the night. They were hungry, they were tired, they were cold, and yet they were all smiles every time we talked. So,
all smiles, even after day 2 or day 3?
Absolutely. And not smiles because they enjoyed being there. No one wants to take time out of their life and take off their busy schedules to do this, but they were determined to win, and they weren't going to let any words from the sheriff or his office or the elements, they weren't going to let anything stop them from their objective. And that passion just carried through and kept their energy going.
It's not like every day you have a protest like this, and here are the authorities, you got the sheriff's office. Was there a feeling of any threat? Did they feel threatened at all? Was it scary at any point for you and the protesters on the ground, Jonathan?
Yeah, absolutely. There were times where we were in fear. We weren't sure if we were going to be arrested. The sheriff even came out and assaulted one of our activists. So there was a threat of bodily harm to the activists. Overwhelmingly, from the support from the public was definitely in favor of the activists, and they were taking our side. But there were a few people who passed by who didn't like the inconvenience of having these PETA supporters there. So there were some backhanded comments and threats made. And that's something you deal with everywhere you go. It's not unique to there, but between the sheriff's office and some of these passersby who were not the most friendly, there were moments where you felt for you were nervous for your physical safety. Overwhelmingly, again, I want to reiterate that we have each other's backs. We're trained professionals. We're in these situations all the time. We know how to handle them. And so there was never a moment where we were going to ever back off. Like, that was never a thought that occurred to us. It was, we will deal with whatever comes our way.
And were there any arrests?
There were 2 arrests of activists. What had happened is the sheriff's office is open 24/7. There's a dispatch window where you can come in and talk to the sheriff, file a police report, ask for help. So that office is open 24/7, 365 to the public. We were sitting in the lobby there, and contrary to what the sheriff said, we never blocked any doorways. We made sure people had access to the police because we understand the importance of that service that's provided. So we did not want to interfere with that. We made sure we were quiet so they could hear us they could hear the emergency line, and we weren't interrupting that, and we weren't blocking doorways. We were just sitting in the lobby, maintaining a presence with our signs. And he decided to close the lobby at 5 p.m. to, a building that was open 24/7. It said so on their website. We even asked if we could be there through the night, and they told us, yes, this is open 24/7. But then on the second day of the protests, he decided to close the doors at 5 p.m. And one of our activists refused to leave. She said, I'm not going to abandon the dogs. I'm going to stay here until those dogs are rescued. So they asked her several times to leave, or she would be charged with trespassing, and she refused to leave, and so they arrested her. The next night, on day 3, they said the same thing, that the lobby would be closing at 5, and again, in an act of civil disobedience, an activist refused to leave, reminding them that the office is supposed to be open 24 hours and that they were not going to leave. It's 14 degrees out, and these dogs need their help, and they're not leaving until they help the dogs. So instead of doing something about the animal abuser, they arrested another, again, totally peaceful activist.
Yeah, it sounds like almost like a textbook civil disobedience, nonviolent, dedicated to the cause, principled, and it went off exactly the way it should have. No one hurt, and yet another day goes by. When the fourth day came, let's go before the fourth day. Tricia, when you were hearing that, it's 4 days or getting to 3 days and maybe 4, did you get people calling you up saying, I know, Tricia, we need reinforcements. What are you going to do now?
Well, it's funny. It was actually quite the opposite. We had by the third day, we had 9 activists who were showing up right in the morning to be there all day. And of course, we were growing in number as the day went on. But we had dozens and dozens of people who were trying to get there over the weekend. We had other PETA staffers, PETA activists, even just random members of the public were calling me saying, I'm 4 hours away. I've got kids, but my family of 4 will drive up there over the weekend. We really had this huge groundswell of support from people all over the country of all backgrounds. Not all of them were hardcore animal rights activists. Many of these people were just people who had dogs, who know that dogs feel the cold and loneliness and pain and suffering just the same way that we do, and wanted to do something to make sure that these dogs could experience safety and warmth for the first time in their entire lives. We had dozens and dozens of people just trying to do what they could to get there. In fact, we ended up having to cancel probably 4 or 5 people's flights from people who were coming in all over the country.
And that's because by the fourth day, Jonathan, how did it come that the fourth day, did you have a sense that things were going to change by the fourth day?
Not at all, to be honest. When we showed up, we got there at about 7:45 a.m., waiting for the doors to open at 8. They weren't open at 8, so we gave them a couple minutes. And by about 8:03, 8:04, I called the office and said, the doors are supposed to be open at 8. And I was told that when the sheriff arrives, he hasn't arrived yet, but as soon as he arrives, they will open the door. We watched the sheriff pull up around 8:10, gave him a couple minutes to get situated, and called again. And again, the doors weren't open, and they said that they would be open when the sheriff was ready. So he put down his tape for this box that they were calling like a free speech zone that we were required to stay in front of. And it wasn't until about 8:20, I believe, that the doors were finally opened. And the first thing he said when we came in is, you're to stay in that box, and if anyone steps outside of it, you will be asked once to go back in the box, and on the second time you will be asked to leave. If you do not leave the premises, you will be arrested for trespassing. So that was like our good morning, basically, when we walked in. So we thought it was going to be another long day of protests. I tried countering to that, and he said, don't mess around, sir. You know exactly what we're talking about here, and I'm not playing around. I will arrest you and any of your activists. So he made it very clear that this was going to be a power struggle. It didn't sound like he was going to give in. We thought, like I said, it was going to be a whole nother day of protests. And then somewhere around 9:30, maybe 9:40, we saw the first animal control truck show up, and they would not tell us anything. Animal control wouldn't tell us anything. No one from the sheriff's office. They wouldn't even acknowledge our existence. A few of the animal control people would smile at us, and they were friendly towards us, so they were probably told not to give us information. But the sheriff's office, from the sheriff to the undersheriff to all the staff, I mean, they were just cold shoulder us the entire time. It was so we were kind of guessing, and we didn't want to give our hopes up, but it was a good sign that animal control was there.
So when they came, what did it mean? Did it mean that they were going to take the dogs, or what? Tell me when it flashed on you that it looked like you were winning.
When it wasn't when the first animal control truck, that was a hopeful sign, but it was when we started to see 2, 3, 4, 5 animal control trucks, each with between 6 and 8 dog crates on them, from different counties all over the state. And we knew that Missaukee County didn't have animal control, so they had to call in recruits from other counties. And then we also saw an inspector for the Michigan, I think it was the Department of Natural Resources, which is in charge of investigating kennels. So when we saw that truck there as well, we knew that something was going down. So we had a pretty good sense at that point that they were going to finally help these dogs.
So you were in the sheriff's office protesting, you're placing your little box, you saw those trucks come in, and then that was logically, you thought, they're going to go and help. They're going to go to the breeding facility, save the dogs, and bring them back. Where did you? When did you realize that that was the case?
As soon as they all showed up, they went into a meeting, and we had a pretty good idea at that point what they were doing. Of course, they all left the office together. They made kind of an assembly and just all headed out one at a time, following each other. And so I got in my car and tailed them at quite a distance, but made sure they were going where we thought they were going, because they would not tell us.
Yeah.
And we followed them right up to Jones's property, and we stayed on the public road there, and we observed the entire time. We even confirmed with the animal control. I had one of them roll down their window, and I asked, "Did you take every last dog off the property?" And they said yes. I said, "There's no more dogs left on the property." And he said yes. So at that point, we knew we had won.
Yeah. Did you see any of the dogs being taken out?
We didn't see any of them because we didn't want to go on his property, and it was set back from the road. But the interesting thing was you could hear the dogs yapping and barking the entire time, and it was gradually getting quieter and quieter as they were put into these crates. And then it was silence. And at that moment of silence, we knew that those dogs were finally out of the cold and finally in the right hands where they can get the help that they need.
Relief, huh?
Yeah.
And did you? What was your feeling? How elated were you when you found out?
Oh, it was the best feeling in the world when we heard the dogs no longer barking, when we saw one by one the animal control trucks turn out of there, when I spoke to the animal control officer and he assured us that every last dog was rescued. It was an amazing feeling. I was also looking to see if Jones was going to be brought into custody or held accountable for his actions. So while we are celebrating the victory for these dogs and that their lives will be changed forever, there's still work to be done, because until he's held accountable and it has a lifetime ban from ever owning dogs or breeding dogs again, this is just going to happen again. So we're celebrating the victory here, but our fight is far from over. And so immediately I was like, all right, let's make sure we hold this guy accountable.
When was your first call to Tricia?
Yeah, we were on the phone the entire time. I was giving her every update possible. I actually had to stay with our car because the police would not let us park our car on the public road by his property, so I had to stay down the street a bit. So I dropped off my colleague Lauren, who we had mentioned before, came in from Boston, and then someone from our social media team so that they could capture video of what was going on. And we were in direct communication. And remember, it was like 0, maybe 2 degrees out. And we were expecting to be inside for a protest that day, not outside. So we were rotating pretty quickly because we were not dressed for the weather. So I did get my chance to be on site and watch from the side of the road. And that's when I got to talk to the animal control officer. But Tricia was aware every step of the way of what was going on.
Okay, let's ask Tricia. Did he keep you informed or did he keep you out in the cold?
Oh, no. I was warm and toasty, metaphorically and literally. So I was, Jonathan texted me saying, oh my gosh, there's an animal control truck outside. And that's when I looped in what we call mission control. Everybody from PETA, our president, Ingrid, our social media people, our communications people, our investigative team, saying, y'all, not to get our hopes up too much, but, animal control is on site. Now, at that time, we only saw the one truck. So we weren't trying to get too hopeful, but we knew we were moving in the right direction because, the sheriff's line the entire time had been, oh, we have to go through the proper channels. We can't do anything. Our hands are tied, which was complete garbage, for lack of a better word, because,
it's appropriate.
The sheriff, the sheriff was more than able to take action. The office knew that there was a felony being committed, and therefore had the right to go in with or without a warrant and seize the dogs because a crime was being committed right in front of their faces. So we knew that things were moving in the right direction. And of course, Jonathan, who we call JJ affectionately, JJ was texting me saying, oh my gosh, 2 more animal control trucks just showed up from a different county. And I was just keeping everybody in the loop. And we were starting to build this momentum and realizing, that it was happening. Once we saw 3 trucks, I think we realized that was almost certainly going to be a win for the dogs.
So how did ultimately, you're communicating with Jonathan, you're texting, you're on the phone, but at some point you had to feel this exhilaration of victory, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, when there were 3 different trucks from 3 different counties, that was the moment when I think everybody knew. I told Jonathan the mood at Mission Control is optimistic because we had a sense that we were getting through to them finally. All of our team who was frantically coordinating, getting the other activists who'd reached out to us, trying to find transportation, coordinate carpools and that kind of thing to Missaukee County. We'd said, okay, everybody hold on that. Call the people who are at the airport right now and tell them not to get on their planes. Because we had at least that much of a sense that things were about to change for the better for these dogs.
Yeah. And then did any of the other protesters text you and say, it's happening, or did they get excited, or were they calm, nonviolent, peaceful protesters all the time?
I mean, they were always calm, nonviolent, peaceful protesters, but I think, the mood of the people on the ground, because as you know, Jonathan and Lauren and another activist had all followed the trucks to Jones's property. So we had other activists on the ground who were still occupying the sheriff's office just in case, right, there was an issue, but they also were getting prepared. We had someone there who was trying to prepare to be a spokesperson for a victory if the media showed up, because we thought with this small a town, the media is going to hear about this quickly.
I mean, it's funny because you look at Michigan, and if Michigan is your palm, the palm of your hand, or a paw, where Missaukee County is like your ring finger, which is it's not near Lansing, it's not near Grand Rapids, it's not near Traverse City is close, but it's really out of the way, which is probably why people feel they can do whatever they want to do to dogs, and including torture them like this. And so the fact that you're able to take an action in a place like that and get the kind of attention has to feel gratifying, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was 2 hours about from any major city. We had people from Lansing and people from Grand Rapids and people from, Detroit and Chicago. People were driving in from Indiana, Fort Wayne, and other places 4 or 5 hours away. But we didn't have a lot of activists. I think only 2 or 3 who were actually from within an hour of the sheriff's office. But, like I said, with the investigation, it was just so brutal and so horrific. The Michiganders knew what temperatures in Michigan feel like, and they knew, they were able to empathize with the dogs. One of the activists who ended up being arrested, Alex, is from Lansing. And she said that when she was in jail, they had blasted the AC for some reason. And she was just sitting there feeling so cold, but at the same time knowing that she was feeling warm compared to what the dogs were feeling. Like there was just no comparison between her discomfort and what those dogs lived 24/7 all day, every single day.
Yeah. And so, Jonathan, this is the culmination of the protest. The dogs are warm and safe. You get the word, it's confirmed. You said earlier, yes, the citizenry, the people need to hold the breeder John Jones accountable, and so the work isn't done. But describe the feeling of gratification, at least at this point, because you got to celebrate every victory. How are you feeling after being there?
Oh, I've been flying high since Friday. It's the best feeling in the world. It's, like I said, why we do what we do, why we love what we do. This job involves long hours. We are on the road constantly. It's late nights, early mornings, and we're always, when we have these protests, it's, pedal to the metal and it's all hands on deck. But we do it for these moments where we can make real changes in the world and affect real lives. The world has changed for these 41 dogs, from a life of torment out in the cold to eventually having loving homes. They're probably getting checked on by the vets as we speak, and then they're going to be in loving homes. So everyone on site there was just so happy. But, they were so well behaved that they didn't even celebrate inside the sheriff's office. We waited until we came outside. I said, stay quiet until we leave. We don't want to disrupt the emergency line. We went outside, and then it was a big cheers. We were taking photos. Everyone was patting each other on the back, hugs, and talking about grabbing lunch to celebrate. So it was, the feeling in the air there was just so electric. It was amazing. It's something I'm going to hold on to and remember the rest of my life.
Wow. Yeah. And it just reverberates from Missaukee County all the way to Nashville, where you were, Tricia. I mean, because, this is the reason why people do what we do in animal rights, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have to, as you said, celebrate every victory. These moments remind us that we can make change for this world, even one person at a time. I like to remind people there were 2 people who slept in the sheriff's office at the beginning of this on Tuesday night. And then that grew to 20 people trying to get these dogs out. And so every time we achieve a victory like this, it really speaks to the power of direct action, of activism, of being there on the ground. I cannot reiterate strongly enough how important it is for each and every individual to go when they have an opportunity to take action for something. Don't stay silent. You have to go, you have to stand up, you have to protest. These types of actions are the only thing that moves sometimes they're the only thing that moves authorities to do what needs to be done for animals. We had been talking to the sheriff since December 3rd, asking him, begging him, telling him, we have to get these dogs out. And it wasn't until people went to his office and stood there that action was taken. We had 2 people sleep in there, as I had mentioned. The next day, they decided to close early. The next day, they decided to put a box on the ground where our protesters had to stay inside. And the next day we won, So it really was a series of escalating tactics and continuing to put pressure on the situation, continuing to have our people show resilience, refuse to leave, and say, we're not going to do anything other than keep on about this issue until the dogs are safe and warm.
Right. Keep the voice for the animals going. But now there is this sense, though, Jonathan, you were there in the cold. There is a sense sometimes that these kind of protests are not passé. Clearly, they can work. They're effective. But a lot of people are moving toward a more, not necessarily sophisticated, but the more modern way of protest is going to boardrooms and, doing things like that. The age of the picket sign protester, the people going to a direct action. But do you think this should revitalize a sense that, hey, direct action does matter, can count, and does make a difference?
It's proof, the proof's in the pudding, the vegan pudding, that it works. And this is a clear example of that. I think most of your seasoned activists who have read about direct action and have been trained on it have never questioned its efficacy. Obviously, there are more modern ways of doing protests that there weren't before, but those have all been in addition to direct action, I think, is a core tenet. That's never gone away, and I don't see it ever going away. That's how the world has changed, and it might change. It might change mediums. It might change, how we do it. But taking people and standing directly in front of power and forcing power to change or to give in is the way the world's worked and always has worked.
Yeah, I was reminded of the Philippines and people power that in 1986, and and just people peacefully gathering and undeniably a force before authority. So Tricia, are you gonna? I guess you'll start that travel agency now for protesters or at PETA actions throughout the country.
Yeah, well, I think what you said is true. We do, in some ways, there are movements towards other forms of advocacy, and I do think a diverse field of tactics is necessary for anything you want to get done. But like Jonathan said, at the end of the day, standing outside in front of Bauer is the way that you're going to get something done. And I hope that people will take away from this action and this success and say, I want to be part of something like that too. I want to be able to make a difference as quickly and effectively as these people did. And I think that they will realize that we do that by putting ourselves out there, literally, our people power, just standing there, sitting there, refusing to leave. Sometimes that's what it takes.
All right, Tricia, you gave me chills there.
To add to that, people were commenting on their Facebook. Mm-hmm. What did they do? They disabled their Facebook comments. People were emailing in. What were they doing? Just deleting the emails. People were calling in. They can take the line off the hook. What they can't do is they can't stop you from showing up in person. We have a legal right to do that. So when all other mediums failed and they tried to block it out, they had to physically arrest 2 activists, and still people refused to leave. We took the protest outside, and we came back the next day at 8 a.m., and another activist was arrested. And they realized we're not going away. They're going to have to arrest every last one of us, and then more people are just going to come in and take our place. And that's the power of direct action.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just want to drive that home.
You're right. No matter what the times, no matter what the technology, it all boils down to showing up, right? You got to be there.
Absolutely.
So, Tricia, Lebkuecher, Jonathan Horn, JJ, thank you for being there in Missaukee County. Thank you, Tricia, for getting people there. And congratulations again on, really, this is the way all investigations should end, right? With this moment of victory, this feeling of victory. And
yeah, absolutely. And just a reminder that anyone who is outraged by the situation at John Jones's, it's very common to have this type of situation in any breeding facility and puppy mill. You know, anyone who wants to end this for good can simply adopt, not buy, anytime they want to add a companion to their home.
Congratulations again, Tricia, Jonathan. Thanks for being on the PETA Podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Jonathan Horn and Tricia Lebkuecher, two extraordinary PETA campaigners on the successful protest that saved more than 40 Jack Russell Terriers from the Michigan cold. The dogs are safe now, and the legal battle against the breeder continues. Get the latest on PETA.org. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to send a link of the show to your friends, of course. Tell them you like the PETA Podcast. Contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok, that's EMILAMOK, or see my vlog at AMOK.com, or see my work at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's at ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe to as well as rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by Carbon Works. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.